Greta, this is going to be really fun. At least for me.
It's going to be fun for me too.
Really fun.
Unless you ask how I did in algebra in my sophomore year of high school, then it's not going to be fun.
I have to say,
it's not going to be fun at all.
I was looking at your because I've been watching you on TV for a long time and through a lot of networks. And
yeah,
so
I can't hold a job.
I was just looking at your resume, and one of the most fascinating things was that, for example, your dad was involved in politics.
My father was. He was the campaign manager for Joe McCarthy, who's from my hometown. Yes. He was the best man at my parents' wedding. I didn't know Joe. Joe died when I was 3. But some people will, who don't like Joe McCarthy, will send me hate mail like I was...
Still?
Yeah.
Like you're responsible?
I think I was responsible, yeah.
And you started, it says 1991. You've been doing this since 1991.
I was an accidental anchor. I was enjoying practicing law and teaching as an adjunct professor at Georgetown and loved it. And Marion Barry, who's our mayor, got into a little bit of a fix. And the local TV...
Or he needed a fix.
Well, yeah, probably needed a fix. And so I was doing stuff outside the courthouse for the local media, because there are no cameras in the courtroom, and the local media knew me, the camera crews, because I tried a lot of really ugly murder cases, and they would follow me from the courthouse to my office, so they knew me. So then when they needed help on the Marion Barry, I was their suspect.
So what was your first, do you even remember your first interview about Israel, or no, about something in the Middle East? Like, how long did it take until you hit on this topic?
I've been doing it so long, I don't know. I think probably someone who's relatively new to the business could answer that question, but I've been covering the Middle East forever. I was raised in a Christian family, and we were so lucky when my sister married a Jewish man, because it doubled our holidays. Although I used to always say that I don't get it. At least we Christians got you Christmas off, but you never been able to get us Hanukkah off. I thought that was a little unfair that we got you a lot of holidays off, but you didn't get us any holidays off. But anyway, his mother was a camp survivor. And so we used to celebrate, and I absolutely love this woman. She was an artist, and she was so talented. And my brother-in-law's sister, who I consider my sister-in-law, is a woman, Aviva Kempner, who does documentaries about Jewish people of Jewish faith. And so, I guess it's always been sort of part of my family.
I feel like it's also been part of the American family. In other words, like, I don't know. I'm maybe oversimplifying this, but I like to think when I was a kid, everybody I knew was either Jewish, Christian, or I would say they were generally on board with the golden rule set of values.
That's sort of interesting to say that, because Helen, who was my sister's mother-in-law, and I considered my mother-in-law the mother of my brother-in-law, as a camp survivor, was the best American I ever met. You didn't dare say anything about the United States to her, because she was liberated and she understood all the values of America, and because she had obviously come here from Eastern Europe, and to be the best Americans, they knew the values. The rest of us just sort of grew up and sort of took them for granted.
Yeah.
But when we talk about good Americans, you talk to the people who have come here having been rescued or liberated by the United States.
My father-in-law he was an immigrant, and he was such a patriot that he smoked Marlboros because it had 2 of the 3 colors, red and white. Yeah, right. Not perfect because it didn't have the blue, but I know what you mean. They value what we have more than if you're born here.
Oh yeah, they got it. And the only reason she survived the camps is because she was blonde and had blue eyes, and so the only reason she survived because that she didn't look particularly Jewish. My mother-in-law or my sister's mother-in-law.
So this is amazing history you have. So you've done both holidays. You get the whole.
Yeah, but I didn't get any of the days off.
Oh, okay.
Work on that, will you? Can you work on that one for me?
I'll talk to my rabbi and see if we can get you.
I was complaining.
See if we can get you a special dispensation.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, the first thing that comes to mind is you have literally interviewed, I don't know, hundreds of, I can't even count. What sticks out to you in this whole...
Well, it's actually sort of recent history. And that's that before October 7th, in July of 2023.
Yeah.
I was in Israel, and I went to the northern border, to the border of Lebanon, and I was taken by the IDF down in the caves that were dug by Hezbollah. And they were so sophisticated, and there was no reason to dig those caves. Lighting, ventilation, communication. And there was no reason to dig those caves from Lebanon into Israel unless you wanted to kill. There's just no other reason. There's absolutely no other reason. And I don't know why those caves stuck with me. Then after, of course, October 7th, I went to Israel, and I walked the kibbutz that was so badly burned, and you could sort of feel the people there. And you see the blackened areas where people were burned alive, and you think to yourself, like just a short time ago, these people were just having to trying to live their lives, and it was so haunting. And the ambulance that was disabled there, I mean, just everything about it. Then I went to the festival grounds, and the festival grounds, by the time we got there, it was all cleaned up, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a beautiful Israeli day. Yeah, you could feel everybody there. You could feel everybody.
I know exactly
there was
what you mean.
It was just so weird how you could feel everybody there. Then, of course, I continued to stay there and work on. I was going to say investigate. I interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu. I've interviewed probably 12 times in my life, a bunch of times. And we have at least I think we have an interesting relationship, because we've known each other so much as that it's a different conversation. It's a conversation more than an interview. And he said to me, I can't remember if he said it off camera or not, but he said that it wasn't going to end until he was finished with the ideology of Hamas. And if you read the Hamas charter, the charter is no negotiation, we're going to destroy Israel, the 1988 charter, which I've read. And I know that there's criticism by some, and a lot of American Jews here, of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they say he's political or something. He said, that is not my sense of Netanyahu. Netanyahu, to me, is walking the walk. He wants to protect Israel. I don't get this, I don't get any of the criticism of him. And if you look at this little tiny country of Israel, and one time when I interviewed him shortly after he was at the UN, and he talked about how he was there for the UN General Assembly. He talked about how it takes 6 hours in a plane to go from one side of our coast, the United States, to Los Angeles. It takes 6 minutes in Israel. 6 minutes versus 6 hours. And so anyway, so then one last thing is that after I came back to the United States after covering the first part of the war, is the 47-ish minute tape that because Hamas put GoPros on and videotaped everything, and I called the Israeli embassy, and I've been around the block long enough that I was one of the earliest to see it because they knew me. And I went over and watched, and it's a terrible thing to watch, horrible thing to watch, but I thought it made me a better journalist. So I watched 47 minutes of it. So, I can't remember where our question started. I get going on this stuff. I'm sorry.
This is actually, where you're going is really important. First of all, let's start at the end. I have not watched it yet.
You haven't? I don't know that you need to, but
I've seen the snippets. I've wanted to. It sounds beyond, like everybody that's seen it has said it's beyond description.
Yes, but I think it's important for journalists to see it, because it's one thing to read about war on the internet, and you read about it and you turn to look at a camera and say, today 6 people were killed. It's another thing to be there as people are being slaughtered, and you see the cruelty. And it's not clinical in the sense that you're reading it off the internet.
Yeah.
Is you really get a much more profound sense of it. And of course, my other trips to Israel, I'd say Israel is just trying to survive. That's all, just trying to survive. And so I don't wish the video on anybody, but I think any American journalist who's reporting on the war ought to see it. And whatever the person thinks or says afterwards is his own business, but I don't know how you can report on October 7th without having the opportunity to actually be there and watch it happen.
Yeah, all the clips that came out around October 7th, I just remember seeing those. And this is what I was going to ask you. Being in Kfar Aza and places like that, I was there too. My brain has not been able to wrap my head around it. In other words,
Who does that?
Yeah.
Is that thing like, I mean, like you look at anything, who does that?
this?
Who does that? I mean, it's just, who does that?
When you see the burned out buildings and stuff, for me, it was like, did this really happen? I mean, you know it happened, but you have nothing emotionally to connect it with because you've never seen anything.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, not to push your face in this, but when you watch this video and you have one guy calling home on his cell phone, bragging to his mother, I think he said, I killed 10 just by myself, Mom. I killed 10 just by myself, or something like that.
I remember that.
I mean, it's like, and as what I understand is 47 minutes. I mean, they have hours and hours. This is somewhat of the sanitized version because a lot of people who were living in that kibbutz don't want that. And out of respect for the families, I think it has been sanitized out, some of the things, some of the faces and stuff.
As somebody who is a part of unfortunately, thank you for Newsmax, generally dying breed called a journalist who actually reports the truth. What do you think? First of all, you mentioned Bibi. What do you think people or the media generally gets wrong about him the most?
I think we live in an echo chamber here in the business. I mean, and I always go back to here in the United States in 2012 when Mitt Romney was running for president and he chose Paul Ryan as his running mate, who was a Speaker of the House and congressman from my home state of Wisconsin. And I remember right after he chose, I was sitting in my office one evening. It was the same day. And at the time, I had like 1 billion TV sets. I was over another network, and so I watched every single one. All these pundits were getting on and saying that it was, quote, a bold choice. And I thought to myself, why is it they're all using the same word, bold? I mean, what are the odds? They could say it's a strong choice or an interesting choice. They were all using the same word. And that's because they all just listen to each other. And so they pick it up. It's an echo chamber. And I don't even think journalists realize it. I think that's a problem. I also think one of the big problems is, and this is going off the side, that I've been lucky enough is I grew up in the news business when they were a lot richer. So I have traveled to all these places, whether it's to North Korea 3 times, whatever. And so I've been able to see this with my own eye and reach my own make my own factual assessment, as well as, my own judgments, opinions, or whatever. We all have opinions. Today, a lot of people never leave the studio or never leave the set. Or if they go out there, they're standing on a box and they fly in, they stay there, they make their reports, and they fly home. And it's because it's a lot cheaper to do that. Mm-hmm. I can put 2 screaming politicians on our air tonight, and that I know are going to say very insulting things about each other because you know who's going to say what, and that will spike my ratings. I know that. And so that's why I really much appreciate Chris running Newsmax, because it's one of those, it has spent a lot of money since I've been here on this, not just for me, but for John Huddy, other reporters to go, whether it's to Israel or to Ukraine or wherever. And every time, and it's in Shelby Wilder, and it's enormously expensive.
Yeah.
And it's not going to blast the ratings up. And that is a financial decision that's made, and I appreciate it because I know how expensive this stuff is.
Chris is, we're talking about the owner of Newsmax. Chris is a unbelievably dynamic person who is just determined to do it the right way.
Well, I'll tell you what I like about is that he has not interfered one iota with my contract, what I do, which is part of the deal. And a lot of the, that's so important. If something is wrong on my show, you blame me 100%. Chris, you can't blame Chris for any of my mistakes. I was never told what to say or do at CNN, never told what to say or do at Fox. And so when I went over to MSNBC, I never saw it coming. And I lasted 6 months because that's just not, I do my best. I'm not perfect. I'm human. I'm flawed. But I need independence to do my best job. And then Chris opened the door for me to do that. So I appreciate it. He's never told me what to say or do.
So with that unbelievable level of independence, you're covering, for example, all of the headlines since October 7th and things going on with Iran.
And he sent me there. Don't forget, he sent me.
Yeah.
Chris Ruddy spent the money for all these trips I've done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how many trips have you done since you've been here?
To Israel, I've done.
You've done a few.
Yeah, 2, I think, but they're for a while. I haven't done 2, but I've gone to Ukraine. I mean, so I've gone to Colombia to do immigration. I don't know where else, but anyway, I haven't been here that long.
Yeah. So, what do you think that people? Okay. There's so many. I kind of feel like the U.S. Israel relationship. It's like the most lied about, misrepresented relationship, and so again, I'm just going to go back to this. When you see other Israel coverage, and you've been there, you've interviewed people, what is the U.S. media missing? Like
they're not there. I mean, that's
I see one thing. Yeah, they miss the culture. They miss the.
It makes a huge bit. I would go. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but going there and seeing it.
Yeah.
Because I think fundamentally journalists want to get it right. I realize they get a little snarky and they want to be popular, and I realize they think they're doing the right thing, but fundamentally, I assume they want to get it right. And to the extent, we have different judgments when we see things. I once witnessed a car accident 30 years ago when I was practicing law, and we called the police. It was a hit and run. I was with 2 other people. We all saw a different color car, and we thought, that was impossible. How could we're off at the same distance and call the police minutes later? So people see things differently. But in the case of Israel, it is so powerful what happened that I try to look at both sides. I try to look at things from 35,000 feet, but I don't know how. If you've been to Israel, if you've walked that kibbutz, if you've seen that film, if you've talked to the people, if you've been to Israel before, if you have a sense of Israel, a history, I don't know. When I hear some people I think to myself, like, where'd they get that?
Yeah, for example, there's a comedian called Dave Smith, and I don't know if you watch and this is this kind of other category that I'm curious as an observer. There's the podcast world now, and the podcast world is not necessarily or not at all that's generally tied to any kind of journalistic standards. In other words, if you can get viewers and you can become famous, you get to have an opinion. Yeah,
it's like putting two politicians on the set saying outrageous things. Right. It's just a different venue.
But without the moderator.
Yeah.
So did you happen to watch the debate between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith on Joe Rogan?
I did not.
So Douglas Murray was trying to make the point, and he was lampooned for this, but he was trying to make the point that Dave Smith is a comedian very much opposed to Israel, and he's never been there. And Douglas Murray was trying, and he was again mocked for basically saying, "How can you make this your career to have an opinion on this topic that you've never been there?" And I watched it and I thought that makes absolutely perfect sense to me.
It's when I have someone on the air who's been in the military, I always say, you know this better than I do, but what about this? Do you know what I mean? You take into account people's experience, and if he's never been there, I don't, when he's mocking something, it's hard for me to
take it seriously.
Yeah, I feel sort of bad for him, in the sense that he's when you've got you're so sure about something and you haven't been there, and such a profoundly important topic, that sort of reflects on the person.
When you're there, can you describe, I don't know, something that comes to mind, something you've seen?
Oh yeah, I was driving in Israel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, how about driving down the road? I was sleeping in the back of a van because we've been working all day in the hot sun in Israel, and we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden the car stops, and everyone says, "Get out, get out, get out!" It was a van. And I'm sound asleep. It's like, not to be flip, but it was like a Chinese fire drill where everybody gets out of the car, where everybody was getting out of the car and running for the ditch because there were missiles coming, or sirens that there were missiles coming in, and we're supposed to get in the ditch and cover our heads. And I was sound asleep, and it's like 7 o'clock at night. So that doesn't happen to me here in Washington. It doesn't happen to me. Another thing that I had put on my phone. I've put on my phone, this is particularly in Ukraine, when I'm there, is I put on my phone the app for missiles, incoming missiles. Yeah. Well, I eventually get rid of it because it wears down my battery. and I need my phone because I'm out on the road. I'm on reporting for 14 hours, but you got so many missiles coming in, your phone vibrating so much if you've turned the siren off that it wears down your battery. And in Israel, I was like, even before the war, when I've been in Israel and, there's sirens and missiles coming out to be intercepted. Now, I'll tell you, whatever, there's another thing that we get talking about the media. Something really, and I can get the facts wrong, it's unusual in my mind, happened to me about 10 years ago. I got an award from a large Jewish organization here in Washington, and the room was filled, must be 1,000 to 5,000 people.
Wow.
And I got seated next to Sheldon Adelson and Miriam Adelson. So you can see that I was the star, that I was getting the award. That was a big deal. And so I was getting an award, and everybody's nice to me. You know what I got an award for? This to me was stunning, because sometime earlier, I was on the air at my old network, and some guy goes into a cafe in Tel Aviv and starts shooting people. And here's why I got the award. I called him a terrorist. And so the next day I had all these Israeli media outlets calling me and saying, you said he was a terrorist. And I thought, and they were happy. I thought, what else would you call someone who goes in and shoots up a cafe but a terrorist? But to see, that shows the level of hurt and anxiety that the people who live in Israel and supporters of Israel have. That it's like calling something so obviously what it is, and that apparently is unusual enough that you get an award. When I couldn't, what was I supposed to call them? And
right.
I wasn't. And my husband and I have been talking about
a violent tourist.
Well, no, I'll tell you, my husband and I have been talking about this for years, because I was very pleased because the award said that I was a great journalist and everything else like that. Where I'm thinking I don't know what else you'd call him. It didn't say. But the thing is that when I was in Israel in July of 2023, and I could have my facts a little squishy about this, but a guy had permission to leave Gaza to get medical care in Israel. At least that's what I think it was. But anyway, what happened was he ran some people over in his car, and he got out and he tried to stab people. And the next day, online, I forget this, CNN referred to him as a driver. And I thought, a driver? A guy who tries to run people down and stick knives into people is a driver? And that's when I understood that award.
It does. It's still, just hearing you describe it, though, it still makes your head spin. Just the idea there are terrorist attacks there every single day, or attempted terrorist attacks. I remember I read a stat, now this is a couple months ago, that since October 7th, just in Judea and Samaria, there had been several thousand attempted terrorist attacks or terrorist attacks. That's hard to get your head around, to your point, unless you see it, unless you actually experience, like you said with the missile, the level of violence that you're experiencing.
But to show how sort of twisted this whole thing is, people say, well, they want to know about Israelis, and who don't know. And one of the weirdest stories to me is Sinwar, who has now been eliminated.
Yeah.
Sinwar was in prison in Israel for a long time. Sinwar in prison, who's a terrible human being, now dead, gets a brain tumor. And what do the Israelis do? They operate and save his life. They then sometime later release him, and he goes to Gaza and becomes the leader there and the architect for October 7th. And the only reason he's alive is because the Israelis operated on him and took the brain tumor out.
I didn't know.
You know that?
I did not know that.
Well, Google it. It's just, it's pretty,
That's stunning.
Yeah, so it's like, it's stunning.
In a lot of these areas, or most of these areas, I know Israel provides the water, the electricity. To your point, people have said to me, like, in Israel, if you want to die in a hospital, die in an Arab hospital in one of the, like in one of the Palestinian territory-run areas. Most people that need medical treatment, serious medical treatment, Arabs that need medical treatment, they come to Israel. for that to that point. But nobody knows that.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I do not like the starving and the fear and everything else going on in Gaza right now. It breaks my heart when I see the pictures of Palestinians suffer. And, if Hamas would surrender, it would be over. If Hamas doesn't surrender, the killings continue. And it means because Hamas has been going on since I think there was a deal in 2014, and Hamas broke that deal on October 7th. I mean, it's like, and even, I don't know if you remember this, but on October 7th, Hania, who was Sinwar's boss, essentially, he was living in Qatar. Mm-hmm. And he's now been eliminated when he went to, I think he went to the funeral of he went to something in Iran about a year ago and was eliminated by the Israelis. I don't know if they've admitted or not, but he was, but I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
But there are two things about Hania. Number one, I showed video on my show of him watching the slaughter of the news coverage of October 7th, and he's sitting there cheering. And I don't know if he's saying Allah is great, but anyway, it was appalling. And I was watching it. The second thing is, when he was eliminated, and there's estimates that he had anywhere from $2 billion to $5 billion. Now, you tell me, he didn't invent the iPhone. He didn't start Amazon. He didn't start a car company. He got that money off the backs of Palestinians, whether it's coming from UNRWA, from the United Nations, or whatever. Because I mean, he did nothing to become so filthy rich and to live in Qatar. Nothing at all.
This may explain. I saw a survey recently that 80% of Israeli Arabs who live outside the Palestinian territories, they live in proper Israel, when asked, would you prefer to be under Israeli government or Palestinian Authority, something like 80% said we want to be under the Israeli government.
But the Palestinians who dare rise up in Gaza now,
right,
will get executed.
No,
the Palestinians, it's terrible how they're suffering. It's just terrible.
Did you follow the recent story where you may have covered this, where there was an aid truck of people trying to bring food into Gaza, and Hamas killed the aid workers as they were coming in?
I mean, there's so many.
It's very common.
Yeah, there's so many stories that I sometimes have a hard time keeping track of all the stories about what's going on in Gaza on a day-to-day basis. How do
you pick? You're getting ready for your show at night. How do you pick what you're gonna?
I mean, there's no sort of formula, and plus the fact in breaking news is that you can have your show picked at 11:30 in the morning, right, and then you got breaking news at 6.
Right.
Yeah, and President Trump has made planning very difficult because he constantly. We have planned at 11:30, but he's very transparent, and so he's constantly doing things during the day. So he constantly throw out different guests, get new guests as he introduces new topics. That he has created a lot of chaos within the business. So there's no particular reason. I try to do things a little differently. Tonight, for instance, we're doing the U.S. attacking Iran, and so I met a pilot about 15 years ago who flies one of those planes, one of the first ones. So bringing him on, so he'll explain about the plane. So so I hope he just explain what it's like to fly the plane. Just sort of a knockoff of We'll do a lot of stories, but I mean I try to do things a little bit different in story because I have to sit there hour after hour every night, so I want to learn something. So I try to get guests, and I try to program where I get to learn something. I don't want a guest where, I can answer the question for them.
Right, because people forget that they're watching you, but you're sitting in that chair watching what's happening, watching the guests. Yeah. Right, and it would not be very stimulating if you already knew the answer.
Then I'm a prop. In terms of the business, I love interviewing people. I love learning about people. I'm very curious. The job that's least attractive to me, and it's an easy job and it's fun, don't get me wrong to do it, but when you are doing things like inaugurations, where you're sitting there and you're saying things like, well, here comes the first lady, And then so and so's
Doesn't she
coming
look
in.
nice?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's interesting. We get great seating, but it's not as challenging and not as I like to learn something every day. And so when you ask me how do I do the shows, usually sort of selfishly in the sense that something where I get to learn.
Okay, so as you've done this and done all these interviews, what do you see that's different about the U.S. Israel relationship today, maybe than during the Biden years? We could be that simple, or we go. I mean, we go all the way back to Carter if you want. I mean,
it's hard to tell because we're on the outside,
yes.
and we don't get to know about the. I don't know how close and chummy Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump were until this past weekend.
Interesting.
I mean, because I think that President Trump likes basically to call the shots, and Prime Minister Netanyahu likes to call the shots, and I think they were a little bit at odds because I'm just guessing because I can't get in their brains and I can't get in the Oval Office, but I think Prime Minister Netanyahu probably would have liked to go first. Like to go earlier. I also think this. I do not know it for a fact, but I think when he went into Iran, he had no idea if the United States would follow. And when he went into Iran, I bet my life on it. Prime Minister Netanyahu knew they could finish the job themselves. Because they may have to go alone, and he's not going to take the IDF in there if they couldn't finish the job. And I also hearken back to the very sophisticated pager operation, because the Israeli military is so sophisticated, and that I think that Netanyahu was probably he could have finished off the job, but I think that the United States just made it easier and faster with bombing.
Your job is to read the tea leaves, and I'm with you. I'm endlessly, all these books that come out about. I remember reading Fight, which was about the 2024 campaign, and what fascinated me was each side spoke to the author, so you kind of got a sense. So when you're reading the tea leaves in these, so you're watching for things like that, the personalities.
Well, think about it. Think about it. If you think, do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu went into Iran with the target being, first of all, the targets, the United States and Iran and Israel have a slightly different target. The United States has the nuclear capability, as does Israel. We're in sync with that. But the other problem is that Israel also has to eliminate, for a lot of Iran, the military stuff that's been funding Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So it has a little extended operation in the United States. But think about it. Can you imagine Netanyahu going into Iran and thinking like, well, I hope the United States joins us?
Right.
He went in there knowing it's going to be a tough job. It'd be great if the United States joins us, but we can do this ourselves, or I'm not going in.
What do you think? What do you think was different this time than before?
With what?
Well,
with the United States?
The United States and Israel, we know what's different with the United States, which we got a president that's actually serious about getting rid of Iran's nuclear capability. But Israel seemed to have a real urgency on this one in terms of.
Well, I don't know that Iran was any. The quote intelligence, which is always questionable, has been squishy. We were told they're weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so I'm a real skeptic when I hear the intelligence things. I think for Israel it was largely opportunity, because it was on the heels of Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, and they're being funded by Iran. And if they're ever going to have the wind behind their back, and to the extent they're ever going to get any international support, and they don't get a lot of international support, not necessarily military support, but support, this was the time. So I think in some ways for Israel, it was the perfect opportunity.
Okay, having interviewed people around the region, I've got to believe, I'm curious your thoughts on this, that people in the other Gulf states are very happy about this.
Yeah, the
Saudis condemned it, but
that's the worst thing. The Saudis, they're not Shiite,
right?
So they've been at odds with Iran forever. Plus, don't forget, Iran funded the Houthis that have been shooting missiles into Saudi Arabia.
The Saudis been at war with the Houthis. Yeah.
So I've asked this on the air a couple of times, because I thought, what the height of hypocrisy is that they are condemning Israel, because nobody, not even Putin's, even Putin's made statements he doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I don't know what he's saying today, but he has made that. Nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, yet Israel is getting condemned for doing the heavy lifting for these other countries because nobody wants it. Nobody wants them.
Why? What's your guess?
I don't, for some reason, I don't know what it is about the Israelis, but they always seem to have the short end of the stick of PR. I don't know what it is. I guess in some ways they've never been victims. And to me, everybody loves a victim. I don't know. But I don't know why. I guess they maybe if they want to, keep their population happy by saying these things. I guess there's that concern. Is it? In a lot of parts of these countries, you don't want to be considered to be a pal of Israel.
Right.
I don't know.
Because MBS so much has said very recently that if Iran got a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia was going to have to start its own program.
Well, and don't forget, and going back to right before October 7th, is that there was, people thought Saudi Arabia is going to join the Abraham Accords.
Right.
And so, this has been a very fluid situation.
So as you're looking at this from a 60,000 foot level, what do you think is possible? Can we actually have the president's been very ambitious about wanting to reshape the Middle East. Like, let's end the constant blowing each other up and let's do business together. You think that's possible?
We all look through Western eyes.
Yes.
And to me, I think, wouldn't it be easier just to be part of the world? Wouldn't it be easier?
Right.
But there are a couple of things. One is people get stuck in their positions.
Yeah.
Lots of grudges. And they just want to win at all costs. They don't care about their people.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going through Putin's head as he pushes forward Ukraine. I don't know what's in Ukraine. I don't know what is in the minds of the leadership of Iran. Obviously, the smart thing is we never should have gotten to this point.
Right.
But and I know there's some people have criticized Trump saying that he should have tried diplomacy. And I think to myself, diplomacy. Well, he has tried a number of times. I think they had about 5 discussions or something, or 6, but it just hasn't worked. I'm all for diplomacy too, but at some point, and the point we have, either it is true that Iran was near a nuclear weapon, or I think that it says that Israel does have to make itself safe in the region. And it's not just a nuclear weapon for Israel, but it's all the other military support system for all these terrorists.
What advice would you give to the up and coming Greta, somebody today that aspires to be you, wants to get it right, wants to tell, because this is the constant conversation about lack of trust. Look, the ascendancy of Newsmax has a lot to do with the fact that people don't trust a lot of media sources, and Newsmax has taken advantage of that by saying, okay, well, you can trust us. And it's grown meteorically in that environment, that in a lack of trust, you can trust us. Well,
I always tell people, and this is the sort of, is that when I first went to CNN, you know who Roger Cossack is? He was my co-host on Burden of Proof.
Yes, yeah.
And we're both lawyers. And when we got there, CNN was not very nice to us. The journalists weren't. And I didn't realize that part of the reason is we were on the air 12 hours a day doing O.J. Simpson. And so we were taking all the oxygen. And we didn't realize, because we didn't know that people in TV want to get on TV. And we show up, and all of a sudden we're doing 12 hours a day for a year and a half. So so people are not nice to us. And we'd go to these meetings and they'd say, well, they're not journalists. And Roger and I'd just be sitting there, just sitting there like they were saying mean things about us, as though dismissive of us. And so Roger and I used to always leave the meeting and we'd say to each other, yeah, you're right. We're not journalists. We went to law school. We took evidence. We took an exam of competency called the bar exam. And we have a code of professional responsibility. So yes, we're not journalists, because you know how you become a journalism? You raise your hand, you get a keyboard. So you ask what the advice is. my advice is, not everyone wants to go to law school. I think you should if you can take a course in evidence, just evidence alone is very helpful, because you can't give opinions in the courtroom. There are very rare exceptions. Like you could say someone looked drunk, because that's pretty much accepted as that observation is a factual one. But you pretty much, you can't. You've got to say, I saw that. And so that's very different than the other thing is you have to speak firsthand. There's no hearsay. Like I can't go into the courtroom and say, yeah, so-and-so said to me that so-and-so said such and such and such, because everything has to be tested. So hearsay is a very bad thing in the courtroom. Plus anonymous sources. You don't have anonymous sources, which there's some need for anonymous sources, but in journalism today, it's so excessively used because it's very easy to do, because people, as long as they'll say anything if they don't have to be accountable for what they say. But we can't have anonymous sources in the courtroom. You have to say, state your name. I'm Greta Van Susteren. Do you promise to tell the truth? So with a legal training, there's a little more emphasis on facts and admitting who's saying it, and not to do so much opinion. So so that to me is that is a little bit better training, because anonymous sources is ruining journalism. Because we're one step off National Enquirer, because the anonymous sources are people who oftentimes
anybody can say anything.
Yeah, it's like it's your one chance to say something rotten about someone and not getting caught. So all right, so that's one thing I say. The other thing too is that is there's so much competition in it, is that you have to be better than somebody else, and the way you do better, like you pick something. Like if I were 18 or 19 years old, I want to be a journalist. Now, I wouldn't go to journalism school at all, because I don't know what you learn. But I would move to Israel, learn the language, and meet people, and also meet Palestinians, do anything, so that when I
be an actual expert.
So that when you go on the air, you're not getting it off the laptop. Or you go to France, or you go to Africa, or you go something, you don't, make the assumption you can't be a world journalist. Pick your area, or study science and become, report about science. Learn something.
The point that you just made is fascinating, because I'm thinking of you and Megyn Kelly. I think Mark Levin may have a legal background. Yeah,
but those are opinion people.
But
those are opinion people.
I know, but what's interesting is the legal point that you're making. It's a focus on facts. Like, you can say that could be speculation, but can you actually prove that? And that is a point I had not considered.
Right,
so you're saying that.
But there's also in the old days.
Yeah.
You pick up a newspaper, and you've got the Wall Street Journal still does a good job. They have their news page, and then they've got their opinion page. Right. Now that is so blurred. And even you talk about Ben Kelly and Mark Levin,
yeah.
They have become opinion people, and have at it. We need opinion.
Yeah,
Opinion's important because a robust debate is. But we've so blurred opinion and fact as well.
Yeah.
That's so blurred. People just keep switching around. You don't know if it's an opinion or if it's fact.
Yeah. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
What would you like to see? Where would you like to see? Like, do you have hope for journalism going forward? Meaning, now that you have so much opinion out there,
I do not.
Do people? Okay, you don't.
No, I think, and until these news organizations, I think first of all, news organizations have to put the brakes on the overuse of anonymous sources.
Yeah, this is huge.
That is so huge, because otherwise, it's just the telephone game that we played as children. And I don't see that happening. I've thought about starting a newsletter every day. I'd make a lot of enemies just taking news articles and highlighting anonymous sources, someone close to, people familiar with, like that, and just visually putting it up every day.
Because I asked a U.S. official in Israel once. I said, "Can you tell me the difference between what you see reported in the news and what you actually are privy to?" And he said, "The difference could fill the Grand Canyon."
Yeah, there was an article written about me recently about helping some guy out, and this is from the New York Times, and the article said, it just said stupid things like I went to high school with him, and that's why I was helping him. I never met the guy, and he's 8 years older than I am. I never met the guy, so he wasn't in high school with me. He's not from my hometown. And in the article, and I got so many calls from friends of mine that went to high school and said, I don't remember this guy. I don't remember him in our class. And I'd say, yeah, because he wasn't in our class. I didn't know him. It was just someone I didn't know that I helped. But even the New York Times, which is writing things, and I don't know how. You know what I think is another problem? I'm not so sure with money problems in the news industry, I'm not so sure how aggressive editors are. It's very easy to make a mistake in journalism. It's like when I saw those 3 cars I told you about. I saw one color and my 2 friends saw 2 others.
Right.
It's very easy to make a mistake, which is why you have to have a checks and balance, which is what the court system does. We have a trial court, we have an appellate court, and we have a high court. There is no checks and balances system that in the newsroom as much as I think there should be.
Okay. Well, this is, you are leaving me with, you just said your standard was interview people that make you think. I'm going to be noodling this for many, many months. And I'm sure our people that are watching are too. Thank you so much for your time.
Happy
I really
to do it. Come on, you know where to find me.